morning again.
Good morning.
Good morning, Michael.
Any of you guys that have been here before or who've ever heard me speak or who happen to know me know that I have a favorite quote that I just love to say. And it's just simply that if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at will change. Yeah? If you change the way you look at things, the things you look at will change. Well, I want to change the way that you look at Kwanzaa, okay? I've been here for a long time, and I've seen us celebrate Kwanzaa in a number of different ways. And we're really blessed here because we celebrate all types of different holidays. We're really blessed because we celebrate diverse holidays. We do Advent, we do Hanukkah, we do winter solstice, we do Christmas, and we even do Santa Claus. We do all types of celebration here. And this time we're going to do Kwanzaa. But for all those times, I know, just because I've been in one of you and I've sat where you sit, I know that a lot of you are thinking, so what's that got to do with me? This is another holiday, and I'll be respectful and I'll be tolerant, but what does it have to do to me? See, I know you say that because I say the same thing when we're talking about Hanukkah. What does it have to do to me? I'm sure there's somebody that's Jewish that says the same thing when we talk about Christmas. What's it have to do with me? What I've learned is that there's a lot of ageless wisdom that comes from way, way, way back. And a lot of common denominators throughout all of those different cultures and those different religions. And even if we don't celebrate that particular one, there's something that we can get from those. So I want to make sure that even though you may not be actually celebrating Kwanzaa, you may not get dressed up in all kinds of African garb, you may not be dancing and lighting candles and all those things, but I want to make sure that you understand what the 7 principles are of Kwanzaa and see how that can work in your life as well as how it works in the center. Good enough? Yes. Good deal? Yeah. So, first I want to make sure that you know a little bit something about Kwanzaa. So, Reverend Karen, once again, I'm calling on you. Why don't you play the video?
In 1966, Dr. Maulana Karenga, now a Black Studies professor at California State University, introduced Kwanzaa, a 7-day social holiday created to celebrate Black identity, encourage unity, and preserve African culture. The name of the holiday is derived from the Swahili phrase Matunda ya Kwanzaa, which translates roughly as first fruits. At an inaugural ceremony for the new holiday, 7 children volunteered to carry the 6 letters in the word Kwanzaa. Rather than leave one child out, the holiday's spelling inherited a spare A at its end. Though Dr. Karenga intended Kwanzaa to be a social holiday rather than a religious one,
I like how you combine the 2 pieces.
he shrewdly specified that it was to be observed from December 26th through January 1st, the week between Christmas and New Year's. The timing was no accident. In the few decades since its inception, it has come to be celebrated by millions worldwide. Kwanzaa displays are rife with symbolism, with unity a strong theme of the holiday. One important tradition is the passing of the Unity Cup. Family members and guests sip from the cup and pour it in memory of their ancestors. The kinara, a candelabra that represents the original stalk from which all African ancestors originate, holds 7 candles, each representing one of the 7 principles of Kwanzaa. Umoja, or unity, is represented by the center black candle. On one side are 3 red candles, symbolizing self-determination, cooperative economics, and creativity. On the other side of the umoja are 3 green candles, signifying collective work, purpose, and faith. Celebrations often include song, dance, and African drums. Though originally intended as a holiday of solidarity, in later years, Dr. Karenga took pains to emphasize that Kwanzaa's message and reach could be so much greater. Just as millions celebrate Irish culture on St. Paddy's Day and Mexican culture on Cinco de Mayo, Kwanzaa has grown to fulfill Dr. Karenga's vision. the vision that people of all stripes celebrate the African culture and spirit.
Okay, so now you know a little bit more about Kwanzaa. Now it's really strange for me because I'm not used to finding holidays that I'm older than the holiday. but this is one that I'm older than the holiday. But it gives you a chance to think about how we come about our holidays and how they evolve and how they change over time. Because even though you hear on the video where they talk about Karenga intentionally had Kwanzaa happen between December 26th and January 1st. Part of that was to keep the commercialism out of the holiday. But, you know, that had to obviously be before we had gift cards and those kind of things. Because nowadays, you know, we go hang out and go spend money doing that week. So holidays do evolve, and that's one that has evolved. But people evolve too. And one of the good things about sharing this about Kwanzaa is I get a chance to show you how I've evolved. Now, Tracy and I are going to do this together, and Tracy's going to give you a lot of good grounding, and she's much better with all the great Swahili terms than I am. But I want to make sure that I tell you some stories, so maybe those same principles will still stick with you just as well. Good enough? So, a lot of you guys know me, but you probably don't know how I got here, how I got to CSL, how I got into science of mind. And for me, I wasn't like some of the others who ran from Catholicism, or I was running from the Baptist church or the Methodist church, or those kinds of things. That just wasn't my path. I don't knock anybody else for it, but that just wasn't for me. What I was doing was I was always into books, into schools, and I was big on history. I read everything, and I got big on American history, world history. That got me into black history. Black history got me into African history, and you can't study African history without getting into religion and philosophy. And by getting deeper into religion and philosophy, one of the philosophies that I started hearing about was science of mind. I hear about science of mind, science of life, divine intelligence, all sorts of things, and that got me to looking into science of mind. At the same time, I was really into bookstores. So whenever I would travel on my job or go anywhere, the first stop I would always make would be at the bookstore. I'd go to bookstores all over the country. And one day I was back home in St. Louis, and I went out to the suburbs, and I went to this bookstore that I heard about. And it was so peaceful and so calming around that bookstore that I came back the next Sunday, and that was the first time I went to Science of Mind Church. It's religious science. Now, when I went there, it was kind of cool. Now, I did sit on the back row like most of us do when we first come, but eventually I moved up a little closer, and I was really cool with the folks. That was my community. But they always kept telling me about another church. You know, they would tell me, you know, there's another Science of Mind church down in the city, down in the hood, down in the ghetto. You guys know what I mean? And that was a place that maybe I should go check out. And there was a minister there that was really cool. Well, for months, I couldn't find the church. I couldn't find the minister. It may have even been a couple of years. I just couldn't find this lady. Then one day, I was attending a Jack Canfield seminar. You guys know Jack Canfield? Chicken Soup for the Soul. Well, I was attending his seminar, and I met the lady. She was at the seminar. Now picture this. She's a tall black lady, and she's wearing an African gown, and she's got a little African headdress on top of her head, and little wisps of gray hair sticking out, and some little gray whiskers, and she was carrying a staff. She looked like Moses to me. And I went up to go speak to her, and I said, I've been dying to meet you. I've been wanting to come to your church. Where you at? And so she told me that, you know, invite me to come to the church. Said at noon, I could come by and I could come check it out. Well, that was fine for me, because most of you guys, if you know me, you know I like to go to the early service. So I could go to the early service, still make it at noon. That's just what I did. I went to the early service in my regular church, and I got in my car and I shot downtown. Any of you that are aware or know St. Louis, there's a street called Delmar. And Delmar Street is the boundary line of St. Louis. It runs east and west, and it divides the north from the south. It divides the rich from the poor. It divides the black from the white. And her church was on Delmar. It was on the black side of Delmar. And when I was driving down the street, I just couldn't find the church. There's a whole bunch of brownstones, but nothing that really stood out like a church, no big parking lot or whatever. And finally, when I found it, I pulled over and I parked and I went inside. Now imagine this. It's old brownstone, and I go in this long hallway. On one side, a bunch of offices, and on the other side, you enter and go into the sanctuary. Well, I went into the sanctuary, and there was one guy sitting way back in the back playing the piano, but other than that, nobody else was there. I mean, nobody was at church. Now, I'm a little older now, and I'm a little bit more spiritual, so it probably wouldn't bother me that much now. But back then, I wasn't hanging out in no church and nobody wasn't there. You know, so I started looking for the door as quick as possible. You know, I must have had the day wrong, the time wrong, something was wrong. And as I was trying to sneak out, I hit one of those boards and it creaked and made a sound. And, you know, the minister was right there in her office and she was writing, preparing, and she popped up. Oh, good morning, how are you? Oh, well, I'm sorry, I must be late. I guess I missed service. Oh, no, you didn't miss service. We're just about to start. Go on in there and sit down, and we'll be right there with you. Now I'm stuck. You know, and I go in there, and it's like, I don't sit on the front row. I'm still not good at the front row. But I did sit on the second pew. And I sat there, and in a few minutes, the lady and her nephew, who turned out to be the usher, they came into the church. The guy playing the piano moved up front, he started playing the organ, and then we began to have church. Just me and them, and we had church. I'm serious. We sat down at the right time, we stood up at the right time, we sang, we prayed, we did all those things. And then she preached, and she preached well. And she began to tell me things that I'd never thought about before. What it was about to run a church, to have a church, to run a community. She told me about how important it was for people to understand that we're all in this together, that we're all united. And it didn't matter if you were from the rich side of Delmar or the poor side, if you were from the black side or the white side. It didn't matter that we were all one. We were all one community. You know, that whole word community includes the word unity. And if you check out what unity means, or community, it means that it's like-minded people. People who think alike, who have the same interests, just like us. We're one community. We're all here. We think alike. And what she told me is that that's extremely important, to have that sense of community. And everybody needs that. But she said that, but don't get too hung up on just that idea, that one community, because within that community you have all types of individuals, and every person needs to determine for themselves who they're going to be and what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. She said that's a part of it. We're each individualized expressions of God. Nobody has ever been here like us, and no one ever will be here like us. We are that special. She went on to tell me that when you're running a church, you know, you've got to have people that understand that it's all of us together. We're all in this together. What they call collective responsibility. We all have to take responsibility for what's going on here. And she said that means that we have cooperative economics, which means that we spend our money with each other, that we do those kinds of things in our community. And on top of that, she said you add a little bit of purpose, because each of us needs to have a purpose. And even your church, your community has to have a purpose. What is it about? What are you here for? And once you know that, you add a little bit of creativity to it, and no telling what you can do. This lady was a genius. And she had a lot of faith. A lot of faith. She told me about the other trials and tribulations of having a church. You know, the light bill has to be paid. The phone bill has to be paid. And if you're going to grow your community, you might be stealing from somebody else's community. And she wasn't like really griping. It was just like a matter of fact. This is just the way things are. And she really inspired me for a number of reasons. One, because she showed me that it doesn't matter who's there and who shows up. If your job is to shine your light, if your job is to sing that song, give that speech, then you go and do the best you can, regardless, and know that things will work out. She taught me that we're all connected and that we all can work together. And she taught me that faith really does work. Because, see, she didn't even know who I was while she was giving that talk. And she was telling me about all of her bills. And I worked for the phone company at the time, and we weren't too big on security at the time, so I went and found out her billing records and found out that she was $300 or $400 behind on her phone bill. And I paid her phone bill. Faith works. Now, I never went back to the church. I never told her. Never saw her again. And even found out that from other people that the church grew and was doing pretty good. And that normally they had a few folks that showed up at that church. I just happened to pick the Sunday that nobody was there but me. I don't know how that happens, but I know that it was a powerful thing to do. And what I learned is that we can do those exact same things here. We can find a way to apply those same principles, those same 7 principles of Kwanzaa. There's a way that we can be unity. We can practice being united. We can be in a community. Even here, I not only have you as one community, but I have sub-communities within this community. I've got the core council and the leadership group. That's another community that I'm tight with and I hang out with. And we partied and partied over the holidays, in case you got it. I've got the men's group. That's another community that I hang out right here. Outside of here, I have more communities than you can imagine. I have my fraternity brothers. I have my kids I went to school with. I have my family. We all have different communities. And when you learn to nurture that, then what you start to understand is that there's power in us coming together. If you just have one stick, you can break it real easy, but if you have a whole bundle of sticks, it's very difficult to break that. That's the same thing with community. And the other thing is to practice self-determination. We do that here, and you can do it in your own lives. I'll use this one, okay? In my own life, I decided that I was going to be a writer, a speaker, and a marathoner. Nobody gave me permission. You think that you got to ask somebody, can I be an author? Can I write a book? Can I be a speaker? Nobody has to give you permission. You determine who you are going to be. And I started walking around saying, I'm a speaker that works for Southwestern Bell. And people started hiring me to come speak. I started saying that I was a marathoner, and I started getting up and doing the work and running, and the next thing you know, I had 5 marathons under my belt after I turned 50. I'm just saying, we get a chance to determine what we're going to do with our lives and how we're going to do it. And I think that we're just so much more powerful when we realize those principles and we practice them. One of my favorite ones is collective works and responsibilities. And being on the core council here, I get a chance to see how that really works. You guys may think that there's a whole bunch of other folks who do all this work here, but there's nobody but you guys. This is how it happens. You guys do the work. Either you volunteer, you serve on one of the core councils, but you do the work. That's how it happens around here. We have collective work and responsibility. We all take responsibility for it. And then the other one I think is really cool is collective economics. At my house, if you come to my house, all the artwork is by people that I know. All of them. I was reading something about Hemingway being a tight friend with Pablo, what's that guy's name? Picasso, is that his name? Picasso? They were friends, okay? And so he would buy his books and he would have his paintings. And it's like, well, I could do the same thing. I'm just waiting for some of my friends to die so that their work would be worth a little bit more. But what I learned is that we can do that. That's collective economics. Even right here at CSL, we can do the same thing. This bracelet, I got it from Bill, who's on the core council. You can get one too. They sell them right there in the bookstore. Make sense? If we spend our money with ourselves, with each other, hey, I got a set of earrings and a necklace from Valerie. I had to bring it back so I could learn how to open the lock back and forth, but it still was a cool little gift. And my best one, watch this. This is CSL, folks. This is what our children do, okay? This was done by Jasmine Johnson. Jasmine is Jeannie's daughter. Jeannie's one of our newest practitioners. Okay? I got it for a measly, I'm not going to tell you. But it's another way that we can support our children, another way that we can support collective economics. So what I encourage you to do is take these principles for Kwanzaa and apply them to your own life, your own personal life, as well as what you do here at the center. Make sense? Yes. And what you'll find out is that here, your creativity is definitely appreciated. Sample there? Here, your creativity is wanted. We want you to be creative. Haven't you noticed how diverse and how much stuff we do around here, whether it's the music or how we decorate, how we do everything? And we've got faith in you. Faith in you that you'll help us with our purpose. And our purpose here is to make sure we have a world that works for everyone. Good enough? Make sense? Yeah. So, you guys got the principles, right? Okay, so we're talking about unity. We're talking about self-determination. We're talking about collective works and responsibilities. We're talking about cooperative economics, creativity, purpose, and faith. Got them all, right? So you don't have to necessarily go home and light a lot of candles and set up your whole altar. That's okay. Just like I'm not going to go set up 8 candles and celebrate Hanukkah. But you can incorporate those principles in your life. Okay? Just like we can incorporate the principles of Hanukkah and the way that those candles stay lit for 8 days, right? And we found out that miracles are possible. And with gas prices today, that candle might stay lit for a little bit longer. Miracles are possible because nobody would ever believe that gas prices would ever be below $2, right? So miracles are possible. And miracles are possible here. Now, I get to do the easy part and tell you the story. But now you get the really good part because I've got a friend who never likes for me to talk about it. But I'm going to take a moment to talk about it because I've got the podium, okay? She's my favorite practitioner, my favorite speaker. I've known her for nearly 20 years. And I have never had the pleasure of sharing the platform with her until today. Ms. Tracy Brown.
So when you came in today, did you get one of these cards? Yes. If you were following along as Michael was talking, what you probably noticed is that not only did he talk about each one of the principles of the Nguzo Saba, the 7 principles of Kwanzaa, but he also made the connection with what's in the right column on your card, the spiritual principles or the spiritual practices that we use year-round. So our founder, the founder of Science of Mind, Ernest Holmes, studied all of the ancient traditions. He studied all of the theory, all of the philosophy, all of the religions of peoples around the world from centuries past. And what we now know as Science of Mind is simply the culmination or the combination of what is true, runs true beneath and behind all of those religions. If you've been around Science of Mind for a while, you know that we often say, all paths lead to God. And so during the season of the holidays, during the winter holidays, what we have been doing here at the Center for Spiritual Living Dallas is actually acknowledging and following in Ernest Holmes' footsteps by looking at all of the ageless wisdom, as Michael referred to, and how it shows up during the season. So if you recall, we started the month of December by focusing in with joyful expectancy on the coming of Christ consciousness. And we lit the candles of Advent, and we prepared ourselves for 4 weeks to step into the light of the truth. And the next week we spent some time focused on Hanukkah, and we remembered that Hanukkah teaches us that there is always sufficient love, there is always sufficient life. The principle of sufficiency comes fully in front of us when we talk about and think about Hanukkah. And then we spent a week being in touch with solstice and being reminded that no matter how dark things may appear, the light is always coming. The darkness in our lives shows up in all kinds of ways. But we are to remember that the light is right around the corner. The dark days get shorter, and the light days get longer. And then we spent some time with Christmas. And if you know the nativity story, you'll remember that it's in the birth of Christ, in the birth of Christ consciousness within us, there was the star of Bethlehem shining down to direct all who wanted to come to the light of life. Where do you go? You follow the light from the star. So it is no surprise, and it is actually a blessing that we can end this month of paying attention to the light that comes from all ancient traditions, the light that is reflected in ageless wisdom with the light of the 7 candles of Kwanzaa, the light that comes from traditions that have been born from that place in the world that has been identified by both science and spirituality as the origin of humanity. So we end this year looking at ourselves in the context of the light of Kwanzaa. These principles coming from African tradition that, as Michael so beautifully illustrated, are completely aligned with who we are in Science of Mind. So I invite you to ground with me these 7 principles and to really bring them forth as your light in your life. And if you would like to follow along using your card and seeing the principles and comparing them to our spiritual principles, that's fine. Or if you would simply like to go within and allow these principles to wash over you, I invite you to breathe with me now. What I know is absolutely true is that the power and the presence of Spirit is the light and the life of Kwanzaa, of Christmas, of the winter solstice, of Hanukkah, and of Advent. And every other great thing that is happening during this season of love and light is all wound up together. But for this moment, we simply breathe in the fact that by sharing all of these holidays, we are actually operating in unity. We are coming together in unity, umoja, and allowing it to be the truth of our experience. So with a whisper, please repeat after me. I light the candle of umoja in my life. Take a breath. Standing in that unity, I am reminded that while we are all united, each one of us is still an individual. And so it is up to me to determine who I am, how I show up in the world, how I represent the light of the Christ consciousness. And so the second principle of Kwanzaa, kujichagulia, self-determination, is that principle which I now ground in. I invite you again in a whisper to simply repeat after me. I light the candle of kujichagulia in my heart. Standing in unity and moving into the individual then allows me to step into collective responsibility, that we work together and we share this world and this life together. And again, whispering, repeating after me, I light the candle of Ujima in my life. Collective responsibility, our sharing together, actually leads us into cooperative economics, that we experience prosperity together because we support one another. And we share what we have so that all can be abundance. I light the candle of Ujama in my world. Moving into purpose. The principle of Kwanzaa Nia, knowing that each one of us has a purpose. And so all of what we do together and all of what we do individually is affecting, is experiencing, is expressing our individual purpose of life and our purpose as a community. I light the candle of Nia in my heart. Standing in purpose, what we know is absolutely true is that there is a creative process that is always happening. And it shows up in everything we do, whether it is the creative arts or whether it is writing a book or whether it is simply being the best mom that I can be. It takes creativity in order to show up. And the principle of Kuumba allows us to unleash the creativity of the divine in, as, and through each one of us. And so, I light the candle of Kuumba in the world. And the seventh principle of Kwanzaa is a principle that we know and live and share one with the other every week and throughout the week. And that is the principle of faith, living in faith, speaking in faith, being in faith, believing in faith. It is this faith, or imani, that we bring forth that guides us and guards us and directs us every day of our lives. So we light the seventh candle by saying, I light the candle of imani in my life. And life actually is the best representation of all of Kwanzaa. The first fruits, the fruits of being, the fruits of living, the fruits of expressing all of these seven principles. And so we say Happy Kwanzaa, for Kwanzaa reflecting the totality of our lives going forward, not just in these 7 days, but throughout the rest of the year and next year and beyond. And so let us anchor this. Instead of our traditional, and so it is, we will anchor it by recognizing that we come together and we are pulling together for a life that is fabulous in every way, a world that works for all. And so with a crescendo of the word Harambe, which means pull together, let's all pull together. We will start at a whisper and progressively get louder as we say together and close our time together. And in this year of celebrating life, by saying Harambe 7 times. Harambe, 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 Harambe.